in here and knock it out. So it's great to meet you. Where are you located?
Savannah, Georgia.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, well, I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, so in the middle of the country. Um, it's great to meet you, and I want to begin our conversation before we get into your work and your mission and kind of your timeline. 4 years ago, this pandemic was raging. We didn't know how we were going to get out of it. It was quite momentous for everybody. How did you get through it? How did it change the way that you do things?
Well, I mean, I'm an entrepreneur for the past 30 something years. So at the time of the pandemic, owned three businesses. And, one kind of had to get shelved a bit because it was probably my, one that could kind of push by itself. And the other one, it was a bakery. And we just really had to kind of figure out how to pivot. And so we just, look for opportunities in our community to continue to sell our product. We couldn't do it in the traditional way because Savannah had shut down pretty much walk-in traffic, but food seemed to be kind of a protected class. So we were able to we found food trucks and popped up with food trucks with our tent, and we were able to continue our online business. And so really, I think the people that I know that made it through the pandemic didn't just kind of throw their hands up in the air and go, gosh, things have just changed. They figured out a way through the obstacle, which is really my mission. Really lines in with what my mission is helping entrepreneurs mitigate the obstacles of entrepreneurship. And so it can be big like a pandemic, which is, all encompassing because the whole world was affected with this shutdown. But it can also be an entrepreneur trying to get business licenses or trying to get through the zoning process and get a shop opened up, and the obstacles just dealing with local and county governments can be, and especially female entrepreneurs, they can let an obstacle like that derail their mission. And so my platform and what I talk about with Lady BizWiz and my consulting process and everything, my mission based is, look, obstacles come about every day, maybe not as big as the pandemic, but what was it? 8 years before that, we had the recession, and, people had that obstacle. I mean, we have obstacles. They're really rather cyclical in the ups and downs of life. I mean, we have, whether they're economic situations, whether we have, bacterial or viral situations, we face them as entrepreneurs. And when we face them all over, not even as entrepreneurs, but I approach it as an entrepreneur base, to the small things like, how do I manage having children and running a business? What are those obstacles? What do they look like for you as an entrepreneur? And then how do you break down what looks so huge, like a pandemic, which is huge? How do you break that down into a manageable plan that you can then start executing on? So that's kind of a long-winded way. My other business, I had applied for some opportunities earlier in the year prior to the pandemic happening. Those opportunities opened up, and my wholesale business for my design company went from one wholesale account April 1st of 2020 to over almost 200 by the end of 2020.
Wow.
And that was an unusual surprise. I had really kind of backburnered my design business. It really was not going to be, it could survive either way. It wasn't, it was doing what it was doing, but it was not, the expenses and everything it wasn't going to be catastrophic. And, but it ended up doing this wholesale process that I had hoped to get into in 2020 and, kind of look at what that would look like. And then that kind of went crazy. And before the end of the year, we were in almost 200 stores across the country. So, it's interesting to me, but that's how I went through the pandemic. I just went through the pandemic day by day. And what can we do today? I set achievable goals each week, and then I mapped a plan to achieve those goals that were not, again, I wasn't looking to where we were in December of 2020. I was really looking to where we were going to be March 30th of 2020, where we were going to be April 30th of 2020. What were we going to do each and every month, broken down into weeks, so that my businesses would make it. And my businesses did, and they thrived. And, we were able to make all of our bills and pay all of our bills, and, made it through just fine, and, have found success on the other side of it. So that's kind of how I approach everything, even if it's not a pandemic.
So what did you want to be when you were a kid? Did you always have a dream of getting into business and being an entrepreneur?
So I'm a third generation entrepreneur. My mom and my dad are both entrepreneurs. Both of my grandfathers were entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurship is something that just really kind of, I guess, is intrinsic. I can't tell you that I had like this dream, but I grew up on Hilton Head, and I mean, I had a really lucrative lemonade stand on the golf course. Um, I guess I was 14 years old. Um, I have started my first real business at 21. I was working at Circuit City. I'm going to age myself pretty quickly. So I was working at Circuit City. When you say Circuit City, you age yourself pretty
Yeah.
quickly.
Oh yeah.
Computers had just kind of come out. I mean, to the whole, like, Windows 3.1 had just launched. I mean, the CD-ROMs were brand new. I mean,
Yeah.
and CompuServe and AOL had just kind of come on the market, and Geek Squad didn't exist. And so I opened a computer training company where I would go and people would buy their computers from me at Circuit City, because that's what I sold while I was in college. But they didn't know what to do with these 4 boxes when they got them home. And, and so I would go to their home before Geek Squad existed with Best Buy, and I would set their computers up. And so I don't know if I ever said I want to be an entrepreneur. I majored in graphic design. I have a degree in religion. I mean, like I said, those are not really necessarily entrepreneurial, education paths, but I like entrepreneurship. I mean, I'm so passionate about entrepreneurship, that it's what, with Lady BizWiz, with my consulting pieces, which is what I'm promoting through the podcast pieces. I believe in what it represents for our country. I mean, every big company, Amazon started in a garage, Apple started in a garage. I mean, these were all ideas that somebody had at some point in time that have become global, mega, corporations as they are today. But they all started with somebody who decided that they had a better way, or an interesting way, or a new way of doing something, and they put that into play. And entrepreneurship is what has always driven, and I think will always drive, our economy, not only locally, but obviously, I think, worldwide.
So who's been a hero for you? Who's been an inspiration?
I don't probably, I watch people. I mean, big companies. I like Steve Jobs' story. Not necessarily like Steve Jobs necessarily, but I like the story of garage, failed, fired, rehired. I mean, the overcoming adversary story. So when people have that story, it's my story. So I resonate really well with that. I resonate with being the most, finding tremendous success in what you do. And then, because sometimes the circumstances outside of your control, finding it all, scattered, and you're now rebuilding and figuring out what to do. And, I think that when I see people who, and they're really probably just, Mrs. Field's story. I love stories like that. I mean, a woman, she couldn't even get her own loan in her own name because it was 1982, I think, that she was opening in Northern California, because her husband was working in a brand new sphere called the tech space, and she wanted to open a cookie thing in a mall, which was brand new, and she couldn't even get a loan in her own name. I mean, she had to have her husband sign her loan, because at that point in time, women couldn't get loans, which is bizarre to me.
Yeah.
But what she was able to do, I mean, I find inspiration in that. I find inspiration in those stories. There's a franchise here in the South. Y'all might have it Midwest, but it's a kind of a Southern thing called Chicken Salad Chicks. It's a franchise out of Auburn, Alabama. And again, I've met her. Her husband passed away a couple of years ago, but I've met both of them. And again, story of same thing as everything. She had an idea to make chicken salad. She was making it out of her home, and health department says you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. So she went in and created a concept and franchised the concept, and then exit strategy out of that concept few years ago. And but it's, like I said, it's a real big franchise in the Southeast.
Yeah.
But most people I admire are people I know. I know several entrepreneurs that kind of did the same thing. I mean, there's another company that's a friend of mine called Wolfgang Bakery, does pet stuff. He's really national now. But he started here out of Savannah, out of his trunk of his car, selling kind of pet products. And he exit strategy 2 years ago to a big company out of New York. And over the years we've talked just my ideas and his ideas, and how he's been able to kind of carve out his path. And I find a lot of value in watching other people do what they've done and hearing how they've overcome. Really, at the end of the day, how you overcome obstacles is how you get to where, because obstacles are part of the everyday. So, I mean, I like the big people, mostly women entrepreneurs. Obviously, I like watching women CEOs make it to the top of, to their places, but I really kind of am more drawn to the homegrown entrepreneur that really had something, and then saw where that went, and doesn't have to go on a Apple monolith way, but I mean, exit strategy out at, $44 million, exiting it out at, those are huge success stories for people. And I know these people, and I admire them, and just have always just found inspiration. And then I want to take that inspiration, I want to take it back to the mompreneur who was just trying to get started with her idea, and then how does she figure out how to get, because those are so far out of her concept of reach, how does she start her business and get going with what she wants to do. So
What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
keep moving forward. I mean, if you're putting one foot in front of the other, you are making forward progress. You can only tread water for so long, and you'll eventually drown if you're just stuck treading water. So if you're, man, that doesn't matter how big that step is, but if you're choosing forward momentum in whatever you're doing, it doesn't have to be with business, but with whatever you're doing, if you're choosing forward momentum, you're one step closer to whatever your goal is. So that's, I mean, and that's how I live every day of my life. And it's how I, talk to people about living every day. I mean, you may not get to the end, but are you one step closer? I'm a big sports fan, so I do lots of sports, lots of sports analogies. So
Yeah,
like, we're in the red zone. I
right.
mean, I love a good football game. So
That's right.
y'all do
You,
in Kansas City for
we
sure.
do.
Lots of football.
Absolutely. We love it. So, of everything that you've done and become in your life, what are you the proudest of?
My three boys. And I think that's a pretty typical answer, but I've
Sure.
I've got three sons that are now young men, 23, 21, and almost 19. And I'm most proud of the fact that they have helped in every aspect of my husband and my business at any point in time. And they understand that you contribute to the world. You are not a consumer. A consumer mentality, I think, is a generation mentality that their age group has, is what can this world do for me? What can I grab from the world? And I have always shared with them that it's not about what the world can give. And that sounds a little JFK. I'm sorry, because that really does sound a little like, not outside what your people. And that's not where I'm coming from. But
Sure.
um, the fact that they contribute. I mean, they contribute, and my middle son wrote my story as his college entrance essay, which I didn't know at the time that he had done. He showed it to me after he had gotten it done and submitted. And it's just a story of resilience. It's a story of chips are way up, and then chips are way down, and what do you do with that? And you don't spend your day in the bed going, maybe tomorrow. You get out and you attack it. And so my children do that. They are absolute contributors to their life, and I think they get a lot more out of it. And when they're having to kind of navigate a life that is, I think, very different than a life that I navigated at the same age, um, I they're they seem to be more prepared. And so for me, for my proudest part is I feel like I have prepared them, and they are prepared for the world. And that means they're prepared for the adversities. I mean, they had adversities when they didn't make the travel soccer team they wanted to make, and they were 9, and and they cried, and I hugged, and we hugged, and I said, they're like, I don't want to do it again. I'm like, no. I said, you'll never make a team you don't try out for. You won't make every team you try out for, but you'll never make a team you don't try out for. You'll never get a job you don't, even if it's a stretch job, you'll never get a job you don't apply for. Stretch yourself, put yourself outside of your comfort zone. And it's how I live my life, and it's how they live. And so for me, I'm most proud of that, I think.
So, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Oh, that is depending on the hour of the day. That can change. I know the perception that people have of me, um, and a lot of times that's true, and then sometimes it's not. The perception that people have of me in the community and my friends and my family is that I'm somebody who's going to get something done. I'm somebody who just jumps in with both feet. Nothing scares me. Nothing, I'm just going to get it done. I mean, I have an answer, and that's the perception. And it's, to a degree, I probably a well crafted perception. The other side, and I do share it, the other side of that perception is that that's not always true. I mean, I don't always have an answer. I don't always feel like putting the next foot in front of the other. I don't always know what I'm going to do. I don't always feel like I've got it. Sometimes I'm just overwhelmed. And so there are days that and this is probably the thing that probably people don't see about me the most, is there are days that I just, not many, but I just get in my car and I cry and I drive and I cry. Um, Big ugly tears. Just, and I drive and I drive and I drive. And saying all the things that make me feel, all the pity party I want to have. I'm not good enough. I don't have, I mean, all the things that I know that people feel all the time. I harness that for whatever length of time that I'm driving until I feel like I get it all out. And then I reach a point in my journey, because I've obviously got to come back. I mean, I can't just keep driving. I mean, sometimes you just wish you could kind of go. But that's just not an option. I mean, I have a family, I have a husband, a business, employees. And so there reaches a point in that journey, whatever that looks like. And sometimes I've driven an hour and a half, 2 hours out of town. I mean, I just kind of drive. But then I hit a point that it's time to turn back around. And so I make that turn. And when I make that turn, I dry the tears. And then all the way back, I spend my time talking about what I have achieved. I mean, today you got up. Today you solved this problem. I spend the next whatever amount of time I had to go, I have to come back. And I spend that time listing out really intentionally my wins. And because I believe everybody usually wins more than they lose, because
Yep.
they're still moving.
Yep.
But you can lose sight of that.
Yep.
So all the way home, I list all my wins. I mean, and so I may not. And then I am fortunate to have a community of people, women in my life that I can be just that person. I can be just somebody who just doesn't have the answers for an hour or whatever. And I can call them and I can just, without them feeling sorry or without them judging, I can just be the person that is not the persona that everybody understands me to be. And a lot of times I can just say, this is my problem. I just don't understand an answer. And they'll like, well, have you thought about it this way? And no, I hadn't thought about it that way at all. I've been so close to it trying to solve it. And I'm like, well, let's look at that. I mean, that might actually work. I mean, and
Yep.
then into play. So I'm pretty purposeful with community, I believe and that is to segue back to COVID. I think that was something that was really difficult at COVID. We had this feeling that we're a social community or a social civilization because of social media, which is not making us social at all. I think it pulls us away from social because it's very highlight reel and very surface stuff. It's not deeper stuff. And I think people feel lonelier now than they probably felt 2 generations past. And so, as with intentionality, that I have built a community of people. And I think that hurt people in COVID. I mean, you had, upticks in alcoholism, you had upticks in abuse, you had upticks in a bunch of really things we don't want upticks in.
Yep.
But we didn't have upticks in making people feel valuable. We had upticks in making people feel not seen or wrong or whatever, depending on how that went. And I think at the end of the day, we have to go back to the fact that I think as a creature, as a organism, I think we're a created creature, but you can go beyond the fact, you can just take it, religion or God out of it and just say,
Sure.
we're just an amoeba that grew. I mean, it makes, to me, the
Yep.
biology makes no difference, but I think we have a herd or a community mentality in who we are to our core. And when we take that away, we are lonelier as a society. We are more anxious as a society. We are more depressed as a society. we things crumble because it does take a village not only to raise children, but it takes a village to keep us going.
Yeah.
And so so the perception is that I really got my shit together. That and that's probably 90% true.
Sure. Sure.
But sorry, my phone beeped.
Oh
But
no, you're good.
10% says I don't.
Yeah.
10% says I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. No, I get it.
So that's kind of who I am, but I try to be
Yeah.
really real and authentic because again, I think especially trying to inspire women entrepreneurs, which is really what I try to do.
Sure.
I think if you can just say this, I know this is a perception, but this is the reality that sometimes I just fake it until I make it that day.
Yep.
And
I get it.
I just got to get up and get going anyway. I mean, I'm
Yep.
not as young as I used to be. I'm finishing up my master class, which is really kind of why I'm doing this podcast thing. And there were some outtake photos the other day, and I'm 52 years old, so I'm not, as young as I used to be. I'm not as pretty as I used to be. I'm not as thin as I used to be. I've got way more gray hairs than I used to have.
Yeah.
So some of the outtakes just didn't look like I sometimes think I look or wanted to look or whatever. Sure. But do you let that stop you with what your mission is? And
Sure.
and that's the answer. I don't look as young as I'm not as young. I mean, things
Right.
just, I was a really pretty girl in my younger years, and I just don't look like that anymore.
Sure.
But it's just way age
Sure.
works, and you just have to kind of be comfortable in your skin and just embrace it. In this Instagram filtered world,
Yeah.
what does life really look like anymore? And it's okay to not be as pretty as you were. It doesn't
Sure.
diminish your message. I don't think my message is not to be on Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition. I mean, that's not my message. But how can you authentically be you?
Yeah.
And make your dream happen? I mean, my book I published is about that. It's about taking your business from concept to the marketplace, and I don't want you to deter that mission. If that's the mission, we've got to figure out a path through to that mission.
Sure.
Which is what my new digital product is hoping to help overcome some of those barriers.
So if anyone wants to reach out, get your book, learn more about your Lady BizWiz, anything going on, where do they go?
LadyBizWiz.com is my website. It's going to have my new digital course linked there. Beginning of October, it launches. My book is an ebook available directly. My book's on Amazon as well, but it's an ebook linked directly on my website, or you can buy the paperback version and I'll ship it to you. Everything about me, working with me, is on LadyBizWiz.com.
Okay, excellent. Amy, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Great. Have a great day.
You too. Best of luck. Take care.